We saw that debate in the comments the other day. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to Locked On UCLA YouTube page. See this debate. Mick Cronin versus Ben Howland. What are their first 4 years looking like? We'll debate that today on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On UCLA podcast. It's Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, once again joined by Max Kelton. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. It's free where we get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, subscribe, download. Thank you for being an everyday listener. As we tease today, we're talking Mick Cronin, Ben Howland in a bit of a debate, and some recruiting news across various sports, and why does baseball suck so bad? We'll talk about all that here on Locked On UCLA. Max, let's get right to it. We saw a heavy debate in the comments of YouTube yesterday on Locked On UCLA's channel, or a couple days ago. Who is done better, and will Mick Cronin suffer the same fate as Ben Howland at the end of his tenure, whenever that is, whether it's retirement or being fired? This is all speculation down the line. What does that look like from year 4 heading into year 5?
Well, it's a different look, and you talk about how Ben Howland inherited a really tough program to handle, to be at the helm for. This was a team that had its first losing season in 50 years the year prior to Howland getting there. And then his first year, it was the second losing season in 50 years. So he struggled on that first season, and then he turned it around, had a winning record the next year, and then took the team to the first of 3 consecutive Final Fours. He had great recruiting success early on, similar to what you've seen from Mick Cronin. But I think the difference is this bubble of COVID that we really haven't talked about, and how Mick Cronin's success in that bubble has just been stupendous. I think more than what many were expecting. And, while Howland was able to take the team to 3 Final Fours, 2 of which in the first, 4 years, it was really impressive. It's been impressive to see Mick Cronin and what he's done, but this year is really indicative of the future for Mick Cronin. And Howland's demise ended a little later in his tenure. So, I'm curious as to see, this defining season for Cronin with a roster of less exciting names than the last couple of years.
UCLA was in first place of the Pac-12 then, when when Ben Howland ended his tenure, and then, the axe came because they didn't have the tournament success. Mick Cronin, you talk about the start. Remember when he was hired, everybody was saying, who wants the UCLA job? Nobody wanted the UCLA job. They're calling everybody, hey, you want this job? No. Mick Cronin's like, I'll take it. He wasn't even the first candidate they wanted. Everybody was like, Mick Cronin, okay. And maybe it wasn't all like that for everybody, but I remember the feeling, Mick Cronin, all right, that could be a good hire, but he wasn't everybody's first choice and everybody's favorite. That wasn't the case, but he also picked up a program that was stumbling, losing its luster, because UCLA's best years came from an air ball that turned into a Sweet 16 on a goaltend, and Lonzo Ball going to a Sweet 16 and falling to Kentucky. That was their height under the Alford era. So now they go to Cronin, who had to turn the team around, pick up a couple pieces from the previous regime, bring in his own pieces, instill this defensive mindset, almost Howland-esque, right? Some people are debating in this comment section, hey, are we going to be boring and slow and not get recruits? No, Mick Cronin has opened up a whole different quote-unquote portal, not the transfer portal, but going and recruiting overseas. He's going and grabbing the best players, not just on the West Coast. Yeah, there's a lot of great talent in any and every sport generally on the West Coast, but being able to go across the country, go across the globe, and find the international talents, and making sure, hey, if you got to go get someone in the portal, Johnny Juzang led UCLA basically to a Final Four appearance. He's tapped in every single way recruiting and proven he can go get somebody, a prep international sort of like a Dembona, go get an international talent like he's bringing in with Ilan Fibleul. We'll see how he turns out. He can go get the best players in states across the country, Brandon Williams all the way in the state of New York, and go get people in his backyard for the most part. I know this recruiting cycle has been a struggle in 23, but this is his transition year into year 5, which is a telling mark into what his overall legacy will be.
And I saw the comparison between Howland and Mick Cronin, and the landscape is entirely different now, 10 years later. The transfer portal, and you mentioned that international recruiting aspect of it, it is entirely different. So while Howland struggled to get some of those premier recruits in his final couple of years, that even if that were the case for Mick Cronin right now, I think that those recruits out of high school don't make as much of a difference now, because you can go to the portal, and UCLA is a premier location, a premier transfer location for a lot of players, out there that are looking for new scenery. And that's the new landscape of college basketball. But Cronin has had some serious success in his first couple of years. One of the things that you can compare them, the similarities you could say, is that the start of Ben Howland's demise began when generally 3 or 4 seasons of consistent veteran players led by like a 4-year like Darren Collison. Those guys all departed. That was Kevin Love and Russell Westbrook's group. Those guys departed. And then it was young guys who were thrust into starting roles when maybe they really weren't ready, and they were strong-arming the coach. Ben Howland lost control of his program. I don't get the sense that that's what's happening here with Mick Cronin in just his 5th year. So I think the leash is a little longer for Cronin.
And the thing is, the difference. Hey, you get told, "Hey, I want you from the portal." You can also get told to leave. And while the Ben Howland era after the Final Four was clouded because of Reeves Nelson and everything that happened within that team, and we're not truly going to dive into that, that is something to acknowledge that happened in the midst of Ben Howland's demise at UCLA, although he still picked up the wins at the end and ended up with 25 wins in his final year and a Pac-12 regular season title. The Bruins under UCLA, they had this similar shift, year 4, year 5 to 5 and 6, where Mick Cronin, as we're talking right now, he's losing these veteran pieces. As college basketball during COVID, with the extra eligibility given, it's turned back to the older 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 year players with all this extra NIL money. And some guys who are really good and would have tested for the NBA are going to stay and make their money in college and stay those extra years if they're not just good enough. And now how does Mick Cronin adapt? This is the next phase, the next step in his coaching year. And again, it sounds like I'm a broken record repeating himself, but this year and 2, they could struggle this year, but if they bounce back the next year and prove, hey, they can have a down year and then grow the next year, I think that's the sign of a healthy program. Because not every year you're going to the Final Four or expect to go to the Final Four. This year was unique in terms of UCLA completely healthy was national championship good at full health. And you can say that for a lot of teams, but this year was a team where they were on the short list of winning a championship and things didn't break their way. And there's only certain seasons you can truly say that. And in March Madness, sometimes you need things to go break your way, right? Heck, even Bill Self, if you can joke about whatever money he's paid or laundered, that's a whole nother joke and debate about anything, right? With all the investigations. But it took him so long, a coach that's beloved by many, always by, the talking heads over at ESPN and everything else, where, hey, he's won so much at Kansas. It took him so long to win 2 titles. And it took miracle comebacks in the championship game to get there. It took UCLA a heartbreak in the Final Four to not get to the national championship game under Mick Cronin. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say Cronin's under a demise. The recruiting's not going so good. You wonder how this recruiting cycle has struggled because who's going to come back? Who's not going to be there? Those are all things that it's tough to try and sell a recruit on. You're going to get playing time. And we've already seen guys decommit. Ron Hall in the latest example because guys have transferred in or decided not to go to the NBA draft.
Yeah, and you know what? It all starts back in the 70s. It starts with Wooden and the success that he had with this program to inject blue blood into its veins. This is not only his success, but then the expectations that arose from that success from the alumni. I read a story today that in 74, when they didn't win a title for the first time in 7 seasons, folks were coming up to John Wooden and saying, the title that you won the next year is just to make up for that other title. They expect it, and I think that expectation has led alumni to be very critical of coaches early on. Like you got a guy like Bartlow, who came in after, excuse me, it sounds like there's some construction over here. You got a guy like Bartlow who came in after Wooden, had tremendous success in his first couple of seasons. And, despite that success, folks were unhappy that he wasn't winning a national championship. But a lot of those folks also forget that it took Wooden 15 years to win his first national championship. So they had patience there. But after all of that success, there's not as much patience for this UCLA program. And now you're talking about a team that has been to 3 straight Sweet 16s, a Final Four in the first couple of years under the Cronin era. You're talking about, hey, is this the demise? And I think it's a little rash and early on to say anything of that nature in a landscape that has been dominated by the COVID era too, and eligibility that is a little different than anything that we've ever dealt with. So I would say, hey, let the leash be long for this guy and let Mick Cronin prove to the folks out there that he's doing the right things on the recruiting trail, especially at the international level, and especially in the way that he's attacking the transfer portal. I like what he's doing. This will be a defining season, however, for Cronin moving forward.
This season and the next one.
Yeah, this upcoming season. If this season, if he has minimal to little success, I think that then you can shorten the leash and say, hey, you got to get some serious recruits. Yeah, something has to change.
And the big thing is go back and see how many times, just Google like Mick Cronin quote John Wooden and how many times he refers back to getting it, right? We did mention how Ben Howland may have lost the control a little bit, right? But for Mick Cronin, he's got that grip on it, and he's got that unique understanding of the status, the UCLA job. Well, I wear a suit because this is what John Wooden, this is what the legacy is. This is who we are as UCLA basketball. And that is what he has as an overall mindset heading to this job. And I'm not sure, why would you want somebody else who doesn't get that? And while Ben Howland brought the success, albeit unfortunately without a title, Mick Cronin showed some success. Maybe it's not that 3-year heights that Howland had, but maybe Cronin can do that over a longer period of time and eventually reach the ultimate goal for UCLA hoops, which is to win the NCAA championship and end this lengthy drought, which has lasted quite a bit too long. But I think as a guy who understands it, who gets the defensive tenacity, he's bringing all these good characteristics. It's 1, unfair because of COVID. 2, he's proven he can recruit. And 3, he's got the on-court success. And even with arguably his least talented team or the team that had the least amount of success in the COVID bubble season, he still found a way to get to the Final Four and was 1 miracle shot away from potentially getting to a national championship game where who knows?
I think the question is who can get us to the promised land. That 95 title, the last, after the John Wooden era from Jim Herrick, I think it was also clouded by maybe some under the table payments for some folks out there because Herrick wasn't always the most honest. So can Mick Cronin get us to the promised land? I think that's the important question. You've seen the talent that he has. You've seen his coaching prowess. You've seen him take teams that haven't had seriously high expectations to a very high level, but he has to get over the hump, and we'll see if he can do it over the next couple of seasons.
Speaking of the next couple of seasons, UCLA women's basketball is looking great. They've got some key players coming, and we'll tell you about that after we tell you about Built Bar. Because if you're looking for a delicious snack and you don't want all the sugar and calories, you've got to try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built Bar. Trust me, it's healthy and it tastes amazing because it's covered in 100% real chocolate and 100% real dark chocolate. Go check out flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. It's only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Go mix the flavors up. Go to Built.com, get 13-bar box, 4-bar box. Try the different flavors. Yum, yum, yum. Go check it out, whether it's at Walmart, a Sam's Club. Go get a 4-bar box or run to Built.com and get Built Bars. You're not missing out. You are going to miss out if you don't have one. You're not missing out if you're eating one at home right now. You're enjoying it. You're loving it. Go have a Built Bar and enjoy it while you listen to the show. Cruising on into segment 2, UCLA women's hoops is well on its way to having a pretty good recruiting class. Corey Close has proven, speaking about recruiting, that she can go out and get some pretty big name players. I know the biggest player of the most recent class went across town, which does suck. But UCLA in the class of 24, we didn't touch on it then, They got an earlier recruit a month ago, and then they just got a commitment as of this morning, as of the recording of this podcast. It was announced, I believe, yesterday. It seems like all of UCLA athletics is coming into this boom mindset, Max. Boom, and that's the reaction for a recruit. But finally announcing her commitment today. One, Elena Arnisalo. I don't have the name pronunciation, so if I butchered it, I do not want to say that's the way you say her name. She is from Finland, a class of 24 guard, a 5'9 product who, where she was playing this year, Max, averaged nearly 20 points per game, 19 and a half, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and nearly 3 steals per game where she was playing in Finland. In the 2022 FIBA European U18 Championships with her team, she averaged 18 points per game, just about 5 rebounds per game, 4 assists, and 2 steals per game. And even when she was on the U16 Finnish national team, was averaging over 23 points per game. So again, she is tapping into the international market and bringing the talent in, but that doesn't mean we should forget the 5-star product who UCLA got a month ago.
Me. You're talking about Dudley. You know, this is a young lady in Kendall Dudley who comes from that Sidwell Friends School in DC, which was the product of, or Kiki Rice was the product of that school back in 2022. Rice at the time, the number 2 prospect in the country, the number 2 recruit, and now UCLA also owns the number 1 recruit from that class too. So, you know, while the men's team has so many questions about its future, the women's team, you can almost pinpoint what this team will look like over the next couple of years. Charisma Osborne returning this year, it is clear that this will be her final year. And after that, somebody's going to step in that leadership role, you know, but this team is young and has a lot of poise to make runs for years to come. And this young lady, she had offers from South Carolina and Virginia Tech. You know, those are a couple of 1 seeds in this tournament. So, you know, she has so much to prove heading in, and she has already played with like the likes of Kiki Rice, you know, during her high school years. So I really like the pickup, another 5-star, and you can just see this team coming together for years to come. Corey Close just does such a good job on the recruiting end, and the young players are going to make a serious impact next year, 2024, after Charisma Osborne has her final hoorah in the Bruin Gold.
Yeah, these 2 players, as Max clarified, they are class of 24 gets. So these are next year they'll come in. These are Big Ten players, right? These are Big Ten Bruins. They won't know what life was like in the Pac-12. They'll know what it's like to play SC, but they'll have Big Ten logos on Poly Pavilion and in the Galen Center, and they'll be all across the country. So they know they signed up for traveling a lot, and they will, whether they know it or not, will be ready to fly all around. And you speak about a DC product. Hey, UCLA gets to play Maryland. I'm not sure what that whole Big Ten schedule is going to look like, but that had to be appealing for someone going across the coast and wanting to play in a UCLA uniform for years to come. So nice to see even Corey Close, who's been able to bring in talent, that just the next step for her is getting over the hump and going on an extremely deep run in the tournament, a Final Four, reach the national championship game. I know a lot of people are banking on Caitlin Clark just balling out again next year in Iowa. Again, also, UConn is expected to be the cream of the crop. South Carolina generally is there. LSU is supposed to be very powerful. But I wouldn't stop UCLA from being one of those top 5-6 contenders with everybody coming back. Hopefully the youth makes some strides to even greater heights next year. Osborne with a little more efficiency. You've got a great team next year and an exciting team for years to come with more talent and more youth, hopefully in the good years of Kiki Rice, London Jones, Jaquez, all the other freshmen that they've been bringing in and players they're bringing back will lead them for success for years to come.
Yeah, that 22 year was the best recruiting class in the country. Dudley, so maybe it skips a year, skips a generation, right? And then Dudley is the number 1 recruit among wings in the country, number 13 in her class overall. She's a great add. And then you love the international aspects of Corey Close's approach. So
yeah, Lena
so much
Arnisalo.
hope. Yeah, so much hope for this team, for Arnisalo and company that are coming in 2024.
We'll see how it all plays out. In the meantime, we're going to cruise on to segment 3. It's time to bash on the baseball team for UCLA. So, Max, baseball, we haven't been too high on baseball this year. We've just come in and talked a lot of trash. Haven't been a lot of positives, especially since we started talking about baseball. They had a lot of love in the RPI when it was very youthful in the early part of the season, when it was just back and forth. The Bruins sit here currently 24-16-1, 10-9-1 in conference play. They just lost a series to Stanford, coming off a series loss at SC. They barely won 2 out of 3 against UC Davis. I don't frankly remember the last time they won a midweek. It wasn't in this month. I know it's the first week of May. Joke intended. They haven't won a midweek since April 4th. That was basically a month ago. So they haven't won a midweek in a long time. You can debate about the necessity of those. And they have struggled to win series. And you're going to tell me this, but I'm going to say it before you, Max. They have not won a Pac-12 series since Utah in the beginning of April. And they couldn't even sweep them.
That last game was up in the air too. You could say, hey, it was cold, during a couple of these series, but look, over the last 13, they're 5-8. This is a team that was at one point, nearing the top 15, top 10 in the country, and they have fallen off. And over that span, those last 13 games, they've hit above 300. In 3 of those 13, and that's just not going to get the job done at the plate. Not to mention the pitching has allowed so much run production on the opposite end of the ball. This is a team that over the last few years has developed into a perennial powerhouse on the West Coast. And John Savage, he knows how to get wins out of this group. Just seems like they're not clicking. It seems like they're missing a piece or two right here that would certainly help them.
Up.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
The one thing, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the one thing, though, is Deuce Gorson has been on fire. His last 4 games, he has, if I can do my math right, 9 hits in over 20 plus at bats, and that's with the return of Karros and everything. So he was dipping under 300. UCLA for a while only had 1 hitter over 300 with the batting average. That was Kyle Karros, and he hasn't played in all the games. Gorson finally came through, and he is swinging the bat well. The team's leader in hits, second in batting average. He is one of the best. He's the leader in slugging percentage and total bases, and is tied for the team lead in home runs. So Gorson is picking up the slack offensively. Of course, sometimes at Sunken Diamond at Stanford, you can swing the bat really well. The Bruins coming off a midweek loss to UC Irvine, who just swept the season series in the midweek over there at Irvine the other night. But UCLA has just struggled. The key reason for their lack of success this year, they're 7-12. And while we say lack of success, they're still 8 games over 500. And based on certain projections, they had been going from regional host to regional 2 seed to now they're falling. As I said, if they keep losing, they could fall to a 3 seed and be on the bubble by the time the Pac-12 tournament comes at the end of May.
They could seriously be on the bubble, right? I have with how this team has played as of late, I'm not sure if they really deserve postseason play, especially at the standard that we expect from John Savage's group, in Westwood. So I would be worried if I were a UCLA fan. Of course I am, but I would be worried, and I just don't think that this group has clicked at the right time, and something drastic has to change if they're expected to make a run. But I have more faith in the softball diamond than I do the baseball diamond this year. I'll tell you that.
Well, the problem is we talk about the lack of clutch hitting, and sometimes they do get it. But just look at the run totals they've been giving up. 12 in the midweek, 10 to Stanford. They still gave up 6. They gave up 6 to Stanford. While they got the win against LMU, I guess I misspoke in terms of midweeks. I forgot the LMU win. My bad. So if you're going to put in the comments, oh, Zach, they beat LMU April 25th. I just forgot that one. Just skipped over it because you go on their schedule. You just look at it. It just says L. You kind of miss the LMU one. But you kind of get the point, right? The lack of success these last few weeks, especially in the month of April, was so underwhelming that you almost forget that they had won the game against LMU on the road, right? So they have won a midweek. That is my mistake just a few moments ago that I said. But they have won a midweek recently, but the lack of success overall, they're not beating the Big West teams. They're not beating the WCC teams, which generally bring up good teams. And these are teams that are competing for a postseason spot. But these next 7 games are extremely crucial, Max. 7 home games. They're 17-4-1 at home at Jackie Robinson. And they got Cal. Cal's one of the worst teams in the Pac-12. They should be able to handle the Golden Bears and possibly, and I should say, need to bring out the Brooms. Fullerton will be an interesting midweek. Fullerton's competing for an NCAA at-large spot as the Big West leader. And then Oregon State. Those are 2 teams jostling for position one over the next in the Pac-12 standings. They're hosting them. They're not going to Goss. You bring them here to LA, bring them to Westwood, and UCLA, I think, should try and win that series. You go 5-2 in this stretch. UCLA is sitting pretty. If it's 4-3 with 2 series wins, that gets them looking good and improving their momentum heading into Arizona State and the Pac-12 tournament at the end of the regular season, which should hopefully give them a much better regional.
Well, you want to finish out the regular season well, but a lot of the Pac-12 tournament really matters in terms of building momentum heading into the regional. And that is if they can get to the regional. You're talking in a very optimistic way, playing that Cal team. If Cal is able to take 2 of 3, I just don't know what the answer is for this group.
If Cal takes 2 out of 3 in LA, I'm waving the white flag. The towel's getting thrown. We're throwing in the towel. If you lose 2 out of 3 at home to Cal, it's one thing to go to SC and go to Stanford and lose 2 out of 3. Emotional series against your crosstown rival and against one of the league leaders. But losing at home to the team at the bottom of the standings or close to it, considering Washington State's at the bottom, near the bottom of the Pac-12, despite their winning record, UCLA couldn't win a game in the snow up in Pac-12 play there. You've got to be able to get wins against not good teams. You've got to stack up the wins. That's part of the reason you build your resume. You can't just go and lose to bad teams all year long. At the end of the year, the committee will look at recency too. You can't forget that recency bias is not a factor, regardless of what they say.
Zach, do you say this is a must-win series? A must-win series for the Bruins?
It's a should-win series. I don't know if it's a must-win series because I think the Oregon State series kind of borders on must-win. I'm just banking that they have this one in the bag. Of course, you play the games and what happens, and they've been struggling. That's one thing. But you lose that series at home to Cal. I mean, what are you doing? I don't know. I don't know what you're doing.
Pitching has to step up. You can't allow as many walks as you have, 14 walks over the last couple of games. They've allowed 10 or more hits in 5 of the last 7. And this team, the pitching hasn't been there. The bats haven't provided the production on the offensive side of the ball. Something's got to change. And the end of the season, it's a stretch that they can try and build some momentum. But something has to turn around for this team that we expected so much more out of them.
Yeah, we just want a lot more from this team. And you never know. Maybe it's a late season run. They've got the talent. They've got freshman All-Americans on this team. They've got people who can hit for power, get clutch. They've got the talent in the rotation. They've got frontline starters. They just got to pitch like it. They got to hit like it. They got to come together, get some sacrifice bunts, and go on a run like they did in, a decade ago when they won their only national championship in baseball. Different team, yes, but can they do so? They have to prove it to us at the end of the season and get hot at the right time. And at this point, they have not showcased that, the ability to win away from the home, to win in conference play, and beat pretty good competition in a best 2 out of 3 format, which is what you're going to have to do to win a regional, even more an aggressive scenario, and do that in a super or a championship series. They just haven't proven that so far. Other than that, that's all the rant we have on baseball. We can only bag on them so much. They just got to prove us wrong. And, they just got to do it, Max. They just got to do it. But that's going to do it for Locked On UCLA. For Max Kelton, I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Become an everyday listener of the Locked On UCLA podcast. You can do that by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Like, comment, download wherever you listen to the podcast. It's free. And if you're an everyday listener, tomorrow we're talking UCLA men's volleyball because we've got the likes of the Final Four, UCLA, Long Beach State. Max is going to preview that for us. We'll talk about that big debate. Beach volleyball's in the NCAA championships this weekend. They're looking for their 3rd NCAA tournament championship of all time in the short-lived event at the moment. And then, UCLA football, they're coming up on the end of everything. What we talk about is, Dante Moore ready to start. And basketball news, we'll wait for anything that drops at any moment. So that is what we're talking about tomorrow. Definitely volleyball. If anything breaks, we'll talk about it. And then be ready for some football and basketball as well. As always, UCLA fans, 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.